I think that's exactly what it was. I don't think it was intended for a Burkinabe audience or even an African audience per se. I think it was intended for a Western audience. And you can tell from the platforms where these things went viral and the accounts that posted them what the audience
Yeah.
was. So the first account that like where it went super viral was on Twitter, and it was this Christian Zionist account that basically targets Black Americans, right? It basically targets Black people, African Americans mostly, Black people in general, and tries to get. So, who is the audience of that account? The audience is primarily, obviously, its own African American constituency, but also the wider community of African Americans who are opposed to what that account stands for and feel affronted because it's targeting them. Those are the people who are going to see it first,
I see.
because whoever is behind it understands that these are the people who make up primarily within the Western Hemisphere. That is, these are the people who are most likely to be the most energetic supporters of this Highland revolution and of Ibrahim Traore and his two comrades. So if you can discredit him within that audience, then first of all, nobody's talking anymore about the fact that Burkina Faso has actually broken off diplomatic relations with France, which is a
We
very
talked
big
about this.
story,
Yeah.
which has very, very big implications beyond just the drama of it all, because there's economic implications to that as well. The fact that these two countries no longer have any official diplomatic relations also means, for example, that economically there's going to be almost no interaction between these two countries anymore, right?
Well, let's step
Because the
into it then.
framework,
I mean,
yeah,
let's step
the
into it.
framework,
I mean, because the other part is, as you point out, that's more, I guess, gravy. That's more interesting in regards to the reaction. But the real
mm,
story is that Burkina Faso has broken off relations with France or diplomatic relations with
yes,
France.
and
What
that's
is the
the
implication?
so
Let's step into it.
one of the immediate implications of that, obviously, as in any sort of international trade or business process, the legal jurisdiction that governs the transactions or business entities or whatever. Typically, when it's been between an African country and France, typically the transaction has been defined by French law, typically. So there are many companies, for example, that are active in Africa but pay taxes in France, right? In fact, it's one of
Wait,
the
say that
major
again.
ways.
You said they're active in Africa, but pay taxes in
Yeah.
France.
Yes. So they are extractive entities. They extract oil, they extract precious metals, rare earth minerals, all sorts of things. But they're legally registered in France, and they pay obviously like a small royalty to the African jurisdiction, but the bulk of their corporate taxes are paid in France, right? So basically, Africa is not getting the benefit of the presence of this corporate entity and all the extraction that it's doing, and the money is rather being spent on public services in France. That's a thing. Now, that is possible because there is a diplomatic relationship between both countries that makes it okay to do that. If a country breaks off diplomatic relations with France, then any sort of economic interaction between that country and a corporate entity from France, if there's any such interaction, now has to be fully defined on a case by case basis.
Right.
So that the African country that has broken off those ties now has a lot more power and a lot more leverage over that company. And
Mhm.
then even, over and beyond that, most, if not all, French business entities that are active in Burkina Faso are going to be running for the exit anyway, because not having diplomatic, the umbrella of diplomatic protection over you means that you don't even something as simple as consular services. You can't get it done if your passport expires, for example, you can't get it renewed because you don't
Right.
have an embassy where you can do that. There's all sorts of implications. So this is a very big story, and what potentially will make it bigger is if it. So I believe it was in 2024 when there was that Ukrainian aided attack on Malian soldiers, and then the three AES countries broke off diplomatic ties with Ukraine, which shows that they have displayed some measure of unified foreign policy. If the other two AES members were to follow suit and also break off diplomatic ties with France, that would be seismic, right? Because that would essentially mean that we don't know yet.
Spoken about it? Okay.
We don't know yet. We will know in the coming days and weeks. But again, this is why this diplomatic split was, in my opinion, some of the biggest news of the year so far. And this is why it was so important for someone to ensure that something buried it.
It's so
right. Someone doesn't want people talking about it.
Yeah. I mean, I didn't know that France had those type of relationships where we can pull resources out of the ground. However, here's a token, but here's the money going to France for the most part. Meaning France is extracting revenue and resources out of Africa without paying for those resources.
That's the thing. So there's in fact, there's a World Bank report where I believe, I forget the exact number that was put, but it was in the hundreds of billions of dollars, money that is lost to African economies every year due to this thing, which in my opinion is a scam, called transfer pricing. So transfer pricing is an extension of this scenario that I just described to you. So essentially what the basic model of transfer pricing, I'll try and explain it in as simple terms as possible. So you have an African country, let's say Mali, right? And they mine, let's say, bauxite or something, right? Now, the French or European or American or Australian or Canadian company that is extracting this thing, that is mining this thing, will then state that according to the price that it is able to obtain for these resources, like the price that it is going to be able to sell them for or process them for, that this is how much such and such is worth when it's extracted. It's an accounting thing. Now, this firm has a subsidy, maybe based in the Cayman Islands or whatever. Now, on the books, this firm then transfers this thing that has been extracted, is transferred on the books from the firm to this subsidiary. And somewhere in the middle of that transfer, the value of what has been extracted gets marked up by 70 or 80%.
Oh, I see what you mean. So in the beginning, they would say, this is worth 5 cents per gallon.
Yes.
And then somewhere along the way, it's like, now it's worth $1.
$2, exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. So, which would mean that the tax or the royalty that you'd pay to the country is based on that initial price, which is a pittance. And then when you transfer it, then you make all the money. So the home country gets absolutely nothing, or as little as possible, and you basically make everything, right? And it's completely legal. It's called transfer pricing, right? So these are these are the mechanics. These are the nuts and bolts of neocolonialism. That is what it looks like in practice, where no one is necessarily directly holding a gun to the president's head like they did in Haiti, 2004. That's very, inelegant. Most of the time, it's not like that. It's a lot. But these are the mechanics through which it is ensured. Some people get to remain artificially wealthy, and some people get to remain eternally artificially poor, impoverished. This is how it is done. So destroying these extractive relationships is how you basically turn this entire system on its head and ensure that Africans actually start to accumulate their own wealth. And someone somewhere is desperate that we shouldn't be having these conversations right now, because that is the conversation that we should be having about Burkina Faso kicking out the French. Instead, we're having a conversation about this complete non-issue of Ibrahim Traore receiving an Israeli diplomat. So it's a psyop, and it has worked brilliantly.
Because that means that somebody saw that and thought to themselves, there's an episode of Boss, and we can end it on this, because this was a great breakdown. And I thank you for this breakdown. You explain why it matters, and you explain the significance of it, and even the significance of why somebody would want to just say bury the story. Because what you don't want to
Exactly.
hear is Mali also doing this, and other countries also effectively doing the exact
Mm.
same thing, kicking up the French,
What,
developing the
what,
new policy.
yeah, what you don't want is for there to be a public groundswell, like a growing conversation about it. You don't want that
Yeah.
because that is, so you probably aren't aware of this. In the French government's estimation, what led to the breakaway of the Sahel and the growth of anti-French movements across the continent was that when these conversations were happening on the internet, when African populations had just come online in the late 2000s and the early 2010s, they
Right.
feel like the French government did nothing about it. The French government just allowed these conversations to happen. And these conversations
Sure.
incubated political movements. So now the whole strategy is to infiltrate conversations and make sure people are not talking about the right things and make sure people are distracted and fighting unnecessarily, such that the right conversations are not being had and the right political direction is not being incubated.
Interesting. Their their response to this was censorship. We need more
Yeah,
censorship, or we need to really spin conversations in a way
yeah,
that they're not necessarily being had, or in ways that are against France.
exactly.
I'll close on this. There's an episode. There's a show, Boss, Kelsey Grammer. I don't know if you know Kelsey Grammer, but
Yes,
a scene in it was him. He had a political opponent who went to Florida and was standing beside a man at the elevator. They took the picture of him standing at the elevator and say, "Who is this Asian gay lover of those politicians?" And what they did was they knew that he was in Florida for something corrupt. He couldn't explain why he was in Florida. And so they could
right.
use the image that they got from the elevator as a way to effectively smear him. So all of the people are talking about who's the gay lover of this particular man. This stuff wasn't even real. It was just made up purely
Right.
from the opposite of it. Same thing. Who is this Israeli picking up with Traore? And of course, the media goes bananas with it, as opposed to
Yeah,
Traore the French. Those are two radically different
yeah,
headlines.
exactly.
Just amazing. David, great breakdown. Fantastic breakdown. And I thank you for it. You explained it extremely well. And I even thank you for coming on a bit later. You have my
Mhm.
appreciation for it. By the way, how are things at the Spearhead?
Well, busy as always, but we're 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 getting by.
Busy is good. Busy is good.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah.
David Hundeyin, he is the Spearhead. Check him out in his outlet. It is a fantastic outlet. It was the way I came across this particular story. I didn't realize that this was gaining ground in the way that it was gaining ground. And you're right, it did bury um, Burkina Faso kicked out the French. It totally buried that story.
Yeah.
So thank you for this.
All right. Thank you for
Have
having
a
me,
good one.
as always.
You be safe.
You too.
Bye bye. Shout out to David. Shout out to David. Great breakdown. And he's right. That is so significant. Like, imagine for the moment if the other Sahel states follow suit and those states start to make agreements in regards to the things that are in the ground in those states. And those states started getting more revenue in as a response to it. Keep in mind, if you think back to most of that in the first iteration of Iran, I mean, what did he want? What was his sin? His sin was, hey, more of the oil and gas that you're pulling from here, the more of that revenue should stay here in Iran because, it's our oil and gas. And for that, they were like, Iran obviously needs some freedom. Just outrageous. Good on him. Good on him. He took power for a reason, and it seems like he's instituting those reasons that he took power. Public backs him for it. That's all I need. I'm going to end this. I am going to say like, I'm going to say share, I'm going to say subscribe. I want to give a shout out to David. David didn't have to come back on, and he was nice enough to do so. And he's my appreciation for it. Be safe. Be kind to the degree that you can be kind. I'll see you guys a little bit later. Oh, by the way, Lath will be on at 1 p.m. Lath will be on at 1 p.m. So I need to set the check for it. You all be safe. You all be kind. If you have any questions for him, feel free to ask during the show. I'll do my best to peruse. Obviously, chats would have to come first. Those are the ones that are most visible, and those are the ones that pay for the show. But if you have any questions for Leif when we're on air, feel free. Be safe, be kind, and I will see you all noon on the programmed Q&A, 1 o'clock on the show with Leif. Have a good one.